Okay, are you ready for this? Here we go, people. This is World War II, but focusing on the home front. So, what is happening in America during World War II? This picture is super scary on purpose. It says, "Keep these hands off." Buy the new Victory War bonds. And yes, this is how everyone in World War II talked. Because we're in the 1940s. Yeah. That hand on the left is Japan, and then that hand on the right is Germany. They're coming for this woman and this innocent baby. But if you buy victory bonds, which are war bonds, then you can support us by winning the war. Here we go. So after Pearl Harbor, the people in America had to make many sacrifices in support of the war effort. Whether that was enlisting in the army or helping out somehow in the home front. So I know this is about the home front, but also there are people leaving the home front because they are signing up to enlist. Many people were isolationists, but when Pearl Harbor happened, everything changed. Once somebody came and attacked us on our soil, on our turf, and killed our Americans, people's minds completely shifted. And it was this idea of we need to go and fight, and we need revenge, et cetera, et cetera. So many isolationists changed pretty quickly after Pearl Harbor. The rally cry was "Remember Pearl Harbor." So that's kind of, again, you are enlisting, you are fighting in honor of what just happened. Now, keep in mind, we need a lot of people in World War II. This is a massive war we are engaging in, and it's two different fronts, two different areas. We have Japan and the war in the Pacific, and we also have the war in Europe. So we need a lot of people. And we are actually going to get 5 million military volunteers. These are going to be men above the age of 18 that are signing up to fight in World War II. However, that's not enough. Believe it or not, we also drafted 10 million people through the Selective Service System. Do you remember the Selective Service Act that was used in World War I? Here it is again. 10 million people 10 million men are being drafted to fight in this war. How does it affect the factories? How does it affect industry and labor? Okay, just like World War I, but so much more intense, normal factories converted to war production. Again, we saw this same theme in World War I, but it is way more intense in World War II. Normal factories that would be making mattresses were now making parts for tanks. Um, a factory that made pencils is now making parts for weapons. This is crazy. Factories everywhere are switching to war production. They are making stuff for tanks, planes, boats, weapons, explosives, etc. Here in the top right-hand corner, you can see that they're making some sort of weapons. Of course, also in the bottom right-hand corner, we see tanks and tank parts. So again, whatever factory you used to be working at, you are now doing something for the war effort. In fact, I do not want to discount the lives that served in the army. Okay, hear me correctly. I don't want to discount their effort, and some people obviously gave their life in World War II for our victory. But many historians have noted, why did the Allies win? There are a multitude of reasons, but one of the reasons why America was such a strong ally in this war was actually the work in the home front. This moment right here, all of the war production, this is one of the reasons why we were the strongest allied force entering at the time that we did. You can also argue it's because we're fresh. We're coming in 3 years late. I guess that's just our style. But yeah, we also have a lot of people on the home front helping us out. We have 18 million industrial workers. So there's a bunch of jobs available. 6 million of them are women. That's where Rosie the Riveter comes up. And 2 million of them are minorities. So people of color that are getting these amazing job opportunities working in the factories during the war. Now, there was still discrimination, particularly against Black Americans. And so A. Philip Randolph is going to do something about that. Remember this name because he's going to be here for a while. A. Philip Randolph is a labor leader. He is a founder of an organization called the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, and he actually organized something called a March on Washington. Sound familiar? He's going to organize another March on Washington during the Civil Rights Movement with Martin Luther King Jr. And the famous I Have a Dream speech comes from that march on to Washington. Well, here's the first march on to Washington, and here's what they want. We loyal colored Americans demand the right to work and fight for our country. There was massive discrimination happening within the enlisting process and at the factories. So, FDR, he gave in. He mandated that all employers and labor unions are supposed to give full and equitable participation in all defense industries. So, it's not a magical wand that fixes everything, but it's a huge step forward for people of color. Okay, how is science changing at home? Well, we have an entire department called the Office of Scientific Research and Development. Their job is to just keep developing new things, either new weapons, new medicines, improving radar, improving sonar. I mean, guys, Germany, Japan, Italy, they are big forces. They have been, they defeated, not defeated, but Germany took over France, and France was one of the strongest countries prior to this. Like, this is not somebody you can just like play around with. This is not a war that we're just going to easily win. We need improvements in all areas, especially radar, especially sonar. You guys know the German U-boats are intense, and we need to be able to see them coming. Okay, our soldiers actually weren't getting killed by warfare a lot. They were getting killed by diseases or body lice that they were getting on the field. And so actually the introduction of these new pesticides helped no more body lice. And this is actually going to save lives. Penicillin, also super important, gets created during this time. But the most important thing that you, of course, should put a star next to is something called the Manhattan Project gets created. You can see the picture on the bottom right. What you see here, what you do here, what you hear here, what you leave here, let it stay here. The Manhattan Project was a super top secret branch. And of course, you know what they're developing. They are developing and testing. Well, they do test, but by then it's not a secret anymore. But they are developing the atomic bomb. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you how much of a big secret this was. So towards the end of World War II, FDR, his vice president is Truman, Harry Truman, and it is such a secret that Truman didn't even know what the Manhattan Project was doing, the own vice president. So when FDR is growing older and growing worse in his sickness and his illness towards the end of his life, they had to brief Vice President Truman on what the Manhattan Project was, because Truman then becomes president, and he's the one that decides to use the atomic bomb. Okay, how is the economy changing? It is huge. So, of course, if war is happening, okay, taxes are increasing. We know that by now, right? Right, people? We know that war costs a lot of money. So, anytime there's a war, income tax is going to be increased, or the amount of people paying taxes is going to increase. Okay, we see another thing in the second bullet point. People are encouraged to buy war bonds. You remember that? You pay the government money now, and then you get that money back later with interest. The idea here, though, is that the government's getting cash right away by the fact that you are buying a war bond. Something similar, I mean, the war bonds are from World War I as well, but they're more intense in World War II. The War Production Board, this might sound familiar. They're going to organize drives for scrap iron, for tin cans, for paper, rags, whatever raw material we could potentially use in the war effort. But the biggest thing that is happening, you guys might feel like this sounds familiar from World War I, but again, they took it another step, rationing. When you ration something, it means that you're setting a certain amount. It means, okay, I have 10 cookies and I have 10 days that I'm here. So if I want a cookie every day, I'm going to ration out my portions and I'm going to make sure that in 10 days I get one cookie each day. You're rationing out your thing. You're setting a certain amount of how many cookies do I want to eat each day. Sorry, I just really want a cookie right now. So rationing is setting amount on people for how much they can buy. So look at the bottom right-hand corner. Americans would be given a ration book. This would have kind of like coupons in it, if you can imagine with me. So every time you go to the store, you would provide your little ration card saying that you have the ration to buy meat, or you have the ration to buy this, or whatever. And it would be controlling everything. It would be limiting people with how much they can buy. Now, you can theoretically, we're not a dictatorship. You could buy as much as whatever you wanted, but you wouldn't be a loyal American if you did that. Hmm. Talk about peer pressure, talk about propaganda. Um, if you are seen taking more than your ration amount, you are very much looked down upon in society, by the government and by your peers, family, friend, the people in the grocery store. I mean, look at this propaganda picture. Rationing means a fair share for all of us. The picture at the top is this lady who is pretty greedy and she's taking all the cans for herself. And the other lady doesn't have a can. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, lady, there's no more food. That lady took it all. But look at the picture on the bottom. If we all ration, if we all do our part, there will be enough food for everybody and we'll have enough supplies to send to the war effort. So again, this is the craziest thing that happened in World War II is just the policy of rationing. A funny story is that there was even some like black markets happening where people would go to buy extra stuff, not in a public place. Usually, black markets are where people buy illegal things. Um, so I hear. And but can you imagine the black market be like, "Hey, yo, you got some butter? You got some eggs? Is that some sourdough bread right there?" Um, so yeah, people were again. That wasn't super common, but there were a couple instances where people talked about that. So rationing, super big change during World War II. Okay, something else that's happening in the home front is something called the Bracero program. It's a program established by an agreement with the Mexican government to recruit temporary Mexican agricultural workers to the United States to make up for wartime labor shortages in the West. Since we're drafting a lot of men and we need a lot of people to fight in World War II, that does mean it has left a hole in the agricultural services, in farming labor. And so this was actually an idea of asking people from Mexico to come up to America and to temporarily work here during the war to help our economy, to help our food production. And the idea was that they would go back to Mexico when World War II ended. Some of them did, some of them did not. But the Bracero program is huge when studying Mexican immigration, Mexican migration. This is actually when we're getting the first wave. We've had Mexican immigrants prior to this, but this is actually a huge moment where we get a big wave of Mexicans migrating to America. Okay, the last topic when we're talking about the home front is a really sad one. And so the rest of the slides are going to be dedicated to this. And yeah, we can talk about it in class. We can talk about what you guys feel about this topic, but this is a really hard moment in US history. This is not a moment that we are proud of, but it's a moment that you need to learn about. So, this is called Japanese internment. You might have heard the Japanese internment camps. The word internment, did you already know what it meant? I'm betting that you did not know what it meant because the government was betting that you did not know what it meant. And so when they said that they were going to intern Japanese people or that Japanese people were going to internment camps, they were actually hoping that you wouldn't know what this word means. Because the word means to imprison people. So internment is the imprisonment or the confinement of people, commonly in large groups, without a trial. That sounds weird. I thought you were innocent until proven guilty. I thought we had rights to a trial in a court. Interesting. So, if America would have publicized, even during World War II, that we were sending Japanese people to prison camps, some ears would have perked up like, whoa, doesn't that sound like Nazis? Huh. Prison camps, that sounds terrible. That sounds scary. But instead, they used the word internment. Now, why is this happening? Why are Japanese people all across America getting rounded up and sent to these prison camps? Well, there's panic, there's hysteria, there's fear. When Japan attacked us in Pearl Harbor, they became the enemy. When Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, they became the enemy. And Americans, both the ordinary American and the American government, got scared. And when you panic, think about when you panic. When you see a tiny little spider crawling on your desk, have you ever panicked because of that? This tiny little spider is coming at you, and you think a giant train is coming at you. Some of you might jump, some of you might scream, some of you might leave the room and say, "Spider, you get the room." That's called panic. You are not thinking clearly. You are not doing things that your rational mind would do. You know that you're much bigger than that spider. But when you're panicking, you tend to do things out of fear. You make things bigger in your mind. And frankly, you kind of act crazy. And so the problem here, though, is that ordinary Americans are panicking. They hear that Japan attacked us, they hear that Japan surprise attacked us, and now everybody who's Japanese looks like the enemy. What's more dangerous is when the government panics. When the government falls into a state of hysteria or fear, they can actually do some real crazy damage to people if the government is panicking. People and the government were believing false rumors. There was this idea that there were spies in our nation, that there was sabotage happening, especially on the West Coast. This is why this is so relevant to us, is because in California, Japanese Americans were targeted the most because there was this fear that people who lived on the coast, people who lived in Santa Monica, Venice, yes, those areas, they were somehow in cahoots with Japan and planning another attack somehow. Yes, I know. It sounds crazy because it is. But here's the craziest part. FDR, he's the one who did this. This is an executive order. This comes directly from the president. And unless it gets overridden, it gets to happen. So unless the Supreme Court like canceled this gets to happen. And so it did, and it happened quickly. So in 1942, 1942, Pearl Harbor happened at the very end of 1941. President FDR issued the Executive Order 9066. Executive Order 9066 gave the War Department authority to define military areas in the West and to exclude from them anyone who might threaten the war effort. What is that saying? The War Department has the ability to declare an area a military area. And from that military area, they can kick out whoever they want, whoever might be a threat. So in this case, people all up and down the West Coast, all up and down the west side of America, that suddenly turns into a military area. And now we have the ability to kick out people who might be a threat. And in this case, it's all persons of Japanese ancestry. Wait, what about Japanese citizens? Yep, them too. Japanese immigrants? What about people that are citizens and they've never even stepped in Japan? Yep, if your grandpa lived in Japan, your great grandpa lived in Japan, if you have any Japanese ancestry in you, you are going to be given a very short window of time. You're going to be told to gather all your belongings and you're going to be told that you're going to a prison camp. Oh, sorry, an internment camp. How long will you be going? We don't know. Will I be with my family? We don't know. Where am I going? You'll find that out later. Japanese internment is a really hard story. Japanese people were looked at as the enemy race. The government believed that Japanese Americans would be enemy agents. So the relocation process started. 120,000 Japanese Americans were forced to live in these internment camps. Now, strange, I'm going to ask you this, write this down in your notes. This did not happen to German and Italian immigrants. Hold up. In World War II, we are fighting Japan, we are fighting Germany, and we are fighting Italy. In America, we have people that have German ancestry, Italian ancestry, and Japanese ancestry. The only group of people that we are gathering up and relocating to internment camps are the Japanese. Why? What's your theory? Why did we only intern Japanese ancestry? I cannot wait to hear your guys' thoughts. Here's a quick map. Please note that this is not the entire United States of America. You guys know that it stops right there at Louisiana. But I'm just focusing on the West Coast, the west side of the United States. Every little triangle is a relocation center. Basically, every triangle is an internment camp. Okay? So people all across America, Japanese Americans, but mostly along the West Coast in California, Oregon, and Washington, they're going to be sent to one of those triangles. Now, just to bring it a little bit closer to home, Manzanar is, I think it's 2 hours away from us. You can see Fresno's right here, Tulari's right here. I don't know if you could see my little hand. Fresno, Tulare, you know something called Bakersfield, right? We're right in here. Manzanar is just a little bit north and a little bit east from us. In fact, a lot of people from Los Angeles, Santa Monica, a lot of Japanese Americans, they had to actually drive through Bakersfield to get through Manzanar. Now, sorry.
Where did you grow up?
Oops.
I grew up here.
Sorry about that. Life in the internment camp. Many internees lost personal property due to the restrictions on what could be taken to the camps. I read this amazing book and I used to read it with my students. We don't have time, unfortunately, this year, but if you're a reader and you want to learn about this topic, Farewell to Manzanar is an amazing book on this topic. It is a quick read. It is just phenomenal, and we have plenty of copies in the South High Library. She describes her experience with her family that they could only carry 2 bags of stuff in their hands. That's all they could bring to the camp. So imagine taking your entire home. You're being told you have a matter of days, you need to leave, and you can only carry 2 bags with you on the bus. A lot of people lost property. Theft was a very common thing. Some people tried to put their items in storage facilities, hoping that they would return back to that at one time. And yeah, a lot of stuff got broken into. So guys, yeah, this is just crazy. Like, imagine, like, in 2 days, you're going to be sent to an internment camp. You don't know for how long, you don't know where, and you don't know if you're going to return to your house. So you have to pack up 2 bags of stuff. Oh, sorry, my dogs. You have to pack up 2 bags of stuff, and that's all you get. People had to sell their homes if they could sell their homes. People had to sell their businesses if they could sell their businesses. And a lot of the times when they're selling their stuff, it's for less than true value. This is a really sad story from the book Farewell to Manzanar, but in the process of trying to sell their stuff, the writer, her mom had this beautiful set of dishes, fine china. She was trying to sell it because she didn't want to bring it. It was heavy. She didn't want to bring it to the prison camps. And she was being offered, $10, $15 for this beautiful set of dishes. And it was just breaking her heart. because she knew how much she paid for them. She knew how valuable they were. But people were like, hey, you got to sell this stuff. So I'm just going to give you this cheap amount because if I, like, why would I pay you more if I know you have to sell these stuff? So instead, it was this moment of just a dignity moment, a pride moment, and just I think a point of desperation moment. But she describes her mom just with no emotion in her face, breaking the plates, plate by plate. Like, again, she knows the worth of these things. She sees that people are offering her barely anything for it. And instead of demeaning herself and selling it for nickels and dimes, she breaks it plate by plate. And I just feel like it's a metaphor for just how Japanese Americans felt throughout this whole process, being told one day, you are the enemy. Because the country that you came from or that your family came from, because they bombed us, you are now the enemy. And we're going to treat you like the enemy. We're going to send you to these prison camps so that we can watch you, and your belongings, your life just doesn't have value. That's the message that was being sent. These camps were done very quickly. Man, they were built so quickly, so fast. Obviously, it's not like very fancy. They're just the cheapest material, quickest way we can build these camps. This is an aerial view of what Manzanar looked like, the one that's right near us. Gosh, the insides were terrible. They were not good quality. They were given government beds, those little cots. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, these people might have had homes, their own belongings. Oh, sorry, I can rant on this forever. But life in the camps, the government promised they would give them food and shelter and the basic hygiene, stuff like that. So they technically did. They gave them shelter. They gave them these little homes with this government bed, with these just kind of shoddy, like, craftsmanship, just not. People described the sand coming through the walls because the two planks weren't even put together that well. Now, why is this person hanging their clothes on this line, you may ask? Sometimes you would be shoved in a room with random people, people that you're not related to, people that you don't know. And so sometimes people would hang sheets or clothing as a divider to give some sort of, this spot is mine. Again, families were moved. Families were hopefully kept together. You hear cases of some families being separated, but a lot of families were kept together. And again, they could be put in the same room if it happened, but you can kind of see maybe they're trying to make the best of this situation, but it's really hard. This is the dining hall. Again, you might have been eating with your family on a normal night, and now you're eating with all of these people. The quality of food was just known to be terrible. The chefs that they got weren't great chefs. They weren't used to making this much food for this many people. A lot of people got sick from the food in the camps, and it just was a really difficult time. Of course, there's a watchtower with a spotlight, with a gun, in case anyone wanted to escape. This is an internment camp. This is a prison camp. This is taken at Manzanar. Why'd they pick the middle of the desert in Manzanar? Where are you going to run? Where are you going to go? You can try to run to those mountains. You can try to run to the hills, but they'll find you. In fact, actually, a lot of people didn't try to escape. I don't know if they were just trying to prove that they were loyal to America or they were just accepting the situation that they were in. But this kind of picture is just kind of eerie to me. Again, whenever there was a new bus of Japanese Americans, everybody would get to the gate, look at the barbed wire on the gate, hoping to see maybe someone that they know, hopefully seeing some of their family, but just seeing who's the next group coming. This picture also, for somehow, I don't know why it gets me, but the American flag just sitting in the middle of this prison camp is just crazy to me. Again, Japanese Americans were looked at as the enemy race. We're going to watch you in these internment camps, and you can't even fight it if you wanted to. In fact, there was plenty of people that did try to fight it, especially citizens of America. The most famous case was a guy named Korematsu. This is the court case Korematsu versus the United States. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the relocation of Japanese Americans. They decided that the government's policy of evacuating Japanese Americans was justified on the basis of military necessity. So, how did they get away with this? How were they able to relocate over 100,000 people, citizens and non-citizens, and force them into these prison camps? The justification was military necessity. This was needed in order to keep the country safe. This was needed in time of war. This was allowed because it was a military necessity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but most Americans now have realized that we made a mistake. Presidents have tried to apologize. There's been talk of reparations. There's been talk of support. There's been formal apologies from presidents. Korematsu actually got the Medal of Honor from one of our presidents. But yeah, it's one of these cases where, again, when the war ended, relocation stopped. These people were allowed to go home. But what a traumatic experience. What a traumatic experience to have for 3 years. What is home? Where are you going back to? And you are still looked at as the enemy race. So that is America in the Homefront. Sorry to end on such a sad note, but Japanese internment. If you have thoughts, feelings, questions, let me know in Zoom. Okay, bye.